The mining colony on Draxel 4 had always been a ghost hanging off the edge of civilized space, more rust than infrastructure, more dust than dignity. Just a rock, spinning in darkness, punching holes in the crust for trace elements no other species bothered with. Then one day, it went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from faulty comm relays or solar interference. This was the kind of quiet that lingered, like something massive holding its breath, just outside sensor range. The last transmission was short. It started with static. Then a woman's voice, ragged, breathless. They breached the secondary core. Repeating, unknown, hostile. Inside the walls run. There was a screeching metal howl, followed by something else. Not a scream, not a growl, a wet low-frequency sound, like flesh being pulled through a turbine. Then silence. The Galactic Concorde passed it off as a mining accident. Radiation spike, geological collapse. Tragic, sure, but not uncommon. Certainly not worth the fuel costs of a council response. But Earth didn't forget its people. 3 days after the signal died, the United Nations Emergency Command greenlit a low-profile recon mission. A single probe, launched from the outskirts of the Dairos Belt, programmed to jump in, scan, and get out. It never got out. The probe's last footage was recovered from its black box. When it drifted back through the veil, rift-riding the gravitational eddies, like something fleeing, on a secure channel inside the UN's Orion, Earth's ambassador to the Concorde, Marshal Cade Wren, watched the footage loop for the 3rd time. He didn't blink. The camera drifted through the colony's outer ring. Buildings had been torn open, not exploded, sliced, like a scalpel had gutted each module from above. No energy weapons, no blast residue, just forced thought. Then it caught something, a helmet, spinning slowly in 0G. Its visor cracked from the inside. Blood too much for one person drifted in globules that refracted the probe's blinking light. Behind it, scratched into a wall, in human letters, Aruan. Before the feed cut out, the camera snapped left violently. A shadow moved behind a glass panel, thin, wrong, long joints, bent the wrong way. Then something struck the probe's hull with a force that sent its optics spiraling into static. Wren sat in silence. "Sir," said his aide, pale as starlight, "the Council's already rejected intervention. They say it's isolated, localized volatility." Marshal Wren stood, walked to the viewport, and stared out at the Concorde's central spire, ringed by the arrogant silhouettes of alien warships. "They didn't hear it," he said. "Hear what, sir?" Wren played the last 2 seconds of the probe's audio, not the scream, the sound that came after. A rising, metallic whine like a capacitor charging, coils vibrating, pressure building just before the feed cut off. Not from the probe, from Earth 1. System over, buried beneath ice and forgotten plans. The engineers aboard the UNS Retribution had already received their black file. Inside authorization codes, trajectory paths, and one line of red directive: spin the rails. The first time Commander Elias Vance saw the UN's Retribution, it looked more like a coffin than a ship. It rested half-buried beneath the cracked ice of Antarctica's subpolar Yard 17, its hull scabbed with rust, its plating warped by age and gravity stress. No gleaming alloys, no gravity wells, no AI-augmented flight systems. Just steel cables, and a single long barrel that ran the ship's full spine like a rail spick through a corpse. "You sure this thing's spaceworthy?" Vance muttered as they descended toward the hangar deck. Beside him, lead engineer Mora cracked a humorless smile. "Spaceworthy? No, but the gun works." That was all they needed. Officially, the Retribution had been decommissioned 70 years ago after a single test shot cracked a moon's crust and shifted its orbit. The Galactic Concorde had called the weapon barbaric, reckless, and graceless. No guidance systems, no energy modulation, just pure, Newtonian violence. Humanity shelved it quietly while the rest of the galaxy laughed. But Earth hadn't dismantled the gun. They'd just buried it until they needed to remind the stars what a planet forged in war could build when no one was watching. In the Retribution's belly, the loading arms groaned as they fed the first round into the chamber. A tungsten uranium alloy slug the size of a no payload, no smart tech. Just mass and speed. The ship's nuclear heart thudded to life. Giant superconductive coils along the barrel began to hum, glowing faintly blue as magnetic fields nested in sequence. One by one, systems flickered on line manual. Controls, thermal balancers, emergency override valves. Vance moved through the bridge, trailing his gloved hand across a dusty console. No holograms here. No neural uplinks, just switches. This isn't a battleship, one ensign muttered under his breath. It's a battering ram. Wrong, Vance said, never slowing. A ram hits once. This hits until there's nothing left. Outside, Earth's orbital control blinked green. Launch approved. The Retribution rose from its frozen cradle, ice shattering from its hull in great slabs, steam billowing in clouds. Its engine screamed as it punched through the upper atmosphere in a climb so steep it left sonic booms echoing across 3 continents. Atop the Council's listening post on Luna, alien observers watched in stunned silence. They knew Earth had kept something hidden, but no one expected this. Not this relic. Not this monster. Not the last operational Titan class, magnetic Railgun. By the time the Retribution broke into deep space, every species on the Council was listening. Not because Earth had asked them to, but because the weapon they'd mocked was no longer hypothetical, and because something far worse than Earth was now awake near the Veil Rift in the dim command chamber. Vance stood before the tactical array. ETA to Drexel 4, 14 hours. Hostile scan? Mora asked. Vance didn't look at her. Negative, which is the problem. Silence settled over the crew. That colony should have been sending out something, even an automated distress ping. Instead, the void ahead was cold, dark, and deathly still, which meant 2 possibilities. Either nothing had survived, or something was waiting. As the railgun spun up to full capacity, the hull around it began to tremble. A single glowing slug clicked into the breach. The coils locked, the safeties disengaged, and somewhere, across thousands of kilometers of silence, something turned its attention toward the thing roaring through the dark. They dropped out of warp into a graveyard. Drax-4 was still there, silhouette, unbreathing, a dark sphere of rock hanging above its slow-burning sun. But its orbit was wrong. It tilted, twisted, like something massive had nudged the planet mid-spin around. It drifted the remains of the colony's orbital station. Not wreckage, not debris. Scraps, the kind left behind after something tears. A thing apart on the molecular level and discards the bones. Commander Vance stood at the Retribution's viewport, watching twisted metal float past like leaves in a current. A fragment of solar panel bumped, the hull painted with a human insignia, now burned black. Thermal scan shows nothing alive, Mora said. Her voice didn't rise above a whisper. But there's power on the surface. Automated systems. Mora shook her head. Negative, it's not ours. Vance turned. How far? 4 kilometers outside the mining hub. Something's building. The colony's layout unspooled across the main display buildings, caved inward. Roads spiderwebbed with deep scars, habitats hollowed out like tin cans, and something new, a central growth, coiled around the fusion well, tall, twisting, moving slowly, mechanically, alive. Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. The bridge lights snapped red. Contact, multiple contacts. An ensign shouted. High-velocity objects inbound from suborbital launch. Vance didn't hesitate. evasive maneuvers. Spin the rails. Prepare to fire. Outside, a dozen Vorten warforms erupted from Draxel 4's upper atmosphere. Insectoid. Biomechanical nightmares, with wings of sharpened alloy and heat. Signatures hotter than engine cores. They flew like swarms, but thought like wolves. The lead form opened its razor-lined maw. An energy lance shot from its throat and slashed across the Retribution's forward hull. The ship lurched. Sparks flew from a side console. Vance gripped the railing, eyes locked on the center target. Track the biggest one. Bring the barrel around. From the outside, the Retribution looked too slow. Too old. It didn't dodge. It didn't dance. It endured. As the Vorten closed in, the ship's massive railgun began to rotate, magnetic coils glowing white-hot as they reached ignition phase. The slug locked into position. 1 shot. 1 opportunity. Range. Vance barked. 200 kilometers. Closing fast. Do it. Sir, it'll overshoot. Vance's eyes were ice fire. The railgun roared. There was no sound in space. But the void bent with the force of the shot. A kinetic slug, the size of a tramcar, launched at Mach 20. Tearing through vacuum, like a bolt of anger, made solid. It slammed into the lead Vorten form, shattered its molecular structure, and kept going. A second later, the war form disintegrated. No explosion, no flare, just gone. The rest of the swarm faltered, not because the humans had fired, but because they'd hit something they weren't supposed to be fast enough to see. Reloading, Mora said, sweat beading on her brow. We'll have another shot in 20 seconds. Vance stared into the distance. Another form had stopped mid-dash approach. It was staring back. Then it dove. Away, back toward the surface. The others followed, retreating, learning, adapting. Double quote, sir. The ensign said, voice. Kraken? They're transmitting something. On an old Concord channel. Let's hear it. A burst of static. Then one word garbled, distorted, but unmistakable. Earth. Vance stared at the signal as it repeated once, then fell silent. The swarm hadn't come to conquer. It had come to test something. Now it knew, and somewhere deeper in the veil rift, something else was listening. They played the footage on loop. No one spoke the first 6 times, or the 7th, in the high chamber of the Galactic Concord. Representatives from 200 worlds watched the video again and again, mute, motionless, stunned. No orchestral soundtrack, no clever editing. Just raw sensor data from the orbital relay. The UN's Retribution, motionless in high orbit. A swarm of biomechanical Vorten warforms, rushing like a black tide. The glow of the railgun's coils reaching terminal charge. A flash of light, a kinetic impact, and then, nothing left. The lead Vorten, gone in a single frame. Its heat signature winked out, like a candle in vacuum. The silence afterward was not technical error. It was the void listening. Ambassador Valrine, of the Solari Confederacy, was the first to break the stillness. This is ... impossible. That projectile had no guidance, no plasma containment, no target prediction. Ambassador Tovern of the Creel merely growled. It had speed and mass, added another, and intent. Intent. Valrine scoffed. They fired without warning. Marshal Cade Wren of Earth finally stepped forward. He wore no armor, no translator noji, no symbolic medals. Just a clean black Earth Fleet uniform and something clutched in one hand. He dropped it onto the council table. Thud. A slug casing. Spent, still scarred from heat stress. It rolled slightly, then stopped, staring back like an eye. Cade's voice was calm, quiet, but every speaker in the chamber carried it clear. You didn't listen when we asked for help. You didn't respond when the colony vanished. You ignored the probes, last footage, and when we sent a ship, you mocked it before it left orbit. No one answered. Wren ran a hand along the casing's edge. This is tungsten and uranium. Mach 20 on impact. No AI, no fusion, no elegance. He leaned forward. We didn't build it to impress you. We built it to survive you. Valerine's voice cracked. That weapon could destabilize entire planetary systems if misused. And if the Vortin had reached Earth? Ren asked flatly. You think they'd have asked permission? Tovarn spoke next. What is your intention, human? To wage war on the Concord? Ren smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. We don't want war, but we're done waiting for your permission to defend ourselves. He tapped the slug casing. You called this weapon barbaric, yet it was the only thing the Vortin respected enough to run from. Silence again. The recording played one final time on the central screen, frame by frame, the shot, the kill, the empty space where a predator used to be. For the first time in Concord history, the Solari ambassador turned off her diplomatic screen. One by one, the others followed. They didn't want to see the blast again, but none could stop imagining it. In the shadows of the chamber's upper gallery, a small delegation from the Caldari Union whispered among themselves. One leaned to the other and asked, Do the humans have more of these? The answer came from Ren before they could even finish the thought. You've seen one shot. You haven't seen ready mode. Far above the Concord chamber, in geosynchronous orbit, a secondary feed from the Retribution pinged Earth's military channel. Railgun 2 had finished assembly. Coils were spinning, slugs were loaded, and something in the dark was still watching. They didn't come for the frontier. They didn't pick the mining worlds, the border stations, the easy targets. The Vortin went for the heart. They came for Earth. It started with static across the Marstora relay chain. Then nothing, no ships on sensors, no hyperwave warnings. Just a sudden blacking out of every outer relay within 12 light minutes. Earth's defense grid didn't pick them up until they breached the EXOSPHERE. By then, it was already too late for evasive maneuvers. Commander Vance stood on the bridge of the UN's Retribution, suspended in low orbit above Earth. Behind him, 8 other dreadnoughts, each jury-rigged with railgun assemblies, moved into a defensive ring. Confirmed Vortin entry vectors, Mora said, voice shaking. Estimated fleet count, over 300, from the planetary surveillance feeds. The Vorton didn't look like ships. They looked like wounds, tearing through the atmosphere in needle-like formations, red-hot from re-entry, trailing ionized clouds, as they screamed toward population centers. In Nairobi, citizens looked skyward to see black shadows moving against the sun. In Tokyo, emergency sirens cut off mid-broadcast. In New York, the power grid flickered. Once, then again, and then came the tremors. Targeting system online, Mora called. All orbital guns charged. Wait for my mark, Vance said, jaw clenched. Let them commit. From orbit, the view was devastating. The Vortin weren't just diving. They were unfolding their warforms, splitting open mid-fall into angular shapes, arms extended, weapons bristling. The leading one launched a bolt of plasma the size of a cargo hauler into the Atlantic. The waves swallowed the coast of Portugal in silence. Sir, Mora snapped. We have firing solutions. If we wait. Vance stepped forward, eyes locked on the descending chaos. He hit the global comm. This is Commander Vance. All units fire. The earth roared, from mountain bunkers in the Andes to submerged platforms in the Arctic. 12 railgun emplacements fired within seconds of each other, in orbit. The Retribution shuddered as its spinal weapon released its charge. The slugs were not smart. They didn't track. They didn't curve. They just hit hard. 1. Vortin warform exploded 60 kilometers above Beijing, the kinetic impact flattening its own descending swarm. Another broke apart. Mid-plunge over Brazil, the shockwave vaporized clouds and ignited the upper air layers. A third was cut in half before it even entered visual range, caught by a rail shot from the new orbital station over Siberia. And yet they kept coming. 10 destroyed. 20.30-5. But the sky still darkened, and one larger than the rest, sleek with crimson chitin and silver wings, slipped through the defense net. It accelerated, it screamed. Vance watched it on the feed, descending straight for Earth's surface at terminal velocity, dragging a plasma cannon large enough to vaporize a city. Mora looked at him. Too fast. We can't intercept in time. Vance turned to the helm. Then aim at the air. What? Don't hit the warform, hit the path. They did. The Retribution's second railgun fired again, not at the creature, but at the air in front of it. The slug moved faster than physics should allow, compressing the atmosphere ahead of the target, turning it into a wall of molten death. The Vorten hit that wall at Mach 15. It disintegrated. Silence on the bridge. Then a chime. Mora's eyes widened there, retreating. On every screen, the swarm broke formation. No words, no signals. Just a full-speed withdrawal like beasts yanked back on a chain. Vance exhaled slowly, watching the wreckage burn in orbit. Now they know. Mora looked over. Know what? He turned to her. That we didn't fire our biggest gun. We just fired the first. They called it containment. What they meant was quarantine. 3 days after the swarm retreated from Earth's skies, the Galactic Concord issued a Level 7 strategic isolation order. No Earth ships allowed beyond Sol. No trading partners. No diplomatic envoys. Not a sanction. A fear response. They'd watched the railguns fire, watched the sky burn, watched the Vorten flee from humanity for the first time in history. But instead of opening dialogue, they closed their borders. In the cold light of Concord Prime, the high chamber dimmed as footage of Earth's orbital barrage played one last time. This hissed. The Valari representative is not peacekeeping. This is brutality. A primal scream from a species addicted to kinetic terror. Ambassador Cade Wren sat silently at Earth's end of the chamber. He didn't argue. He didn't interrupt. He waited. The Solari delegate stepped forward, eyes narrow. We ask for an explanation of the railgun network buried under your oceans, your ice caps, your planetary crust. Wren tapped a control on his wrist. Behind him, a hologram flickered to life. It showed Earth not as a planet, but as a weapon. 12 confirmed rail platforms. 5 orbital stations. And beneath Antarctica, something else. Blueprints glowed. Rail lines the size of maglev trains. Turrets built inland not for space defense, but for ground-to-orbit retaliation. Solari gasped. The Valari hissed in alarm. Wren stood and stepped forward. You called us backwards, primitive. You laughed at steel and magnets. Called our weapons hammers thrown by cavemen. He looked each ambassador in the eye, and yet it worked. In the shadows above the chamber, 3 Keldari observers whispered to each other. Why underground? Why build rails facing upward? Because, said the senior one, eyes cold. They didn't build them for the Vorten. Back on Earth, Mora descended alone into the Antarctic core line, a restricted facility even she wasn't cleared to visit until now. The elevator stopped 2 kilometers. Beneath the surface, she stepped out into silence. There were no flashing lights, no humming reactors, just one enormous chamber, and the longest barrel ever constructed. 2 kilometers of magnetized steel. 1 round, loaded, remember. As she walked along the gun's spine, a figure emerged from the shadows, an old engineer, with frostbitten hands and a half-ruined voice. This one's not orbital, he rasped. Not meant for space. Mora stared. Then what's it for? He looked up, eyes reflecting the frozen steel. If they land on us again, we'll fire straight through the crust. She blinked. Through Earth. He nodded once, and into anything above it. Meanwhile, on Concord Prime, the council met in private session. Ambassador Wren wasn't invited. The debate turned bitter. The proposal was simple: force Earth to disarm, or face coordinated Concord opposition. But no one wanted to say it out loud, not after seeing what a single round had done to a swarm. Ren stood alone on a balcony, watching the stars through stained glass panels. Mora's voice came through his earpiece. "They're scared." He didn't smile. "Fear isn't respect." "Then what now?" Ren looked toward the horizon of the alien city, where gunless peaceful ships floated like ornaments. "We make them remember why they need us." In the dark edge of the Veil Rift, the Vorden regrouped in silence. One of them carried a shard of hull plating from a railgun slug, still hot, still humming, and in the abyss far beyond them, something older had awakened, something that had once known Earth's name, had forgotten to be afraid. The first species to kneel wasn't expected. Not a fringe world, not a scavenger race. It was the Terran Syndicate, one of the Galactic Concord's oldest founding members. Their flagship dropped out of warp above Earth's moon, shieldless weapons powered down, engines warm in surrender. They broadcast a simple 3-second message in perfect human English: "We request Earth's protection, on your terms." Inside the UN Stellar Command Dome, deep beneath Geneva, Commander Elias Vance stared at the live feed. The Terran vessel floated like a prayer in orbit, dwarfed by the UN's Retribution, which sat in silent, armored vigil beside it, its railgun locked in standby, coils humming like a volcano just below eruption. "Put them through," Vance ordered. The screen flickered. The Terran diplomat appeared thin, trembling, eyes haunted. We saw what you did. When the Vorton came, the Council watched. You acted." Vance didn't move. "You're here for a favor." "No," the diplomat said. "We're here because if Earth hadn't fired, we'd all be dead. We came to stand with you, before something worse arrives." The broadcast went public in under an hour. By the end of the day, 7 more species had reached out. By the end of the week, 12, not with demands, not with negotiation points, with offers. In the Council's Grand Hall, debate fractured like cracked glass. "They're not conquering," spat the Valari delegate. "They're gathering allies. And we gave them every reason to do it," said the Creel ambassador. "We left them to face extinction alone. They didn't lash out. They defended, and they won." Silence. Then the Solari representative, who had once laughed at Earth's primitive slug throwers, spoke softly. "I'd rather stand behind the railgun than in front of it." On Garo 6, a once neutral world, near the Veil Rift, human aid shuttles landed for the first time. Locals wept as crates of medicine, atmospheric filters, and power cores were unloaded by Earth Fleet engineers. Children ran up to them, pointing at the railgun insignias stitched into their sleeves. "Is that the gun that made the sky scream?" one boy asked, eyes wide. The soldier knelt beside him. "No, kid," he said. "That's the one that made it go quiet." On the edge of known space, the UNS Sentinel arrived above a struggling mining colony under siege by rogue pirates. The pirates didn't answer hails. They turned to flee. They were fast, but the slug was faster. 1 shot, 1 crater. No casualties, just a signal left behind, transmitted in all languages. "You are under Earth's protection." Back on Earth, inside a high-security vault beneath Iceland's crust, a meeting took place between Vance, Mora, and Marshal Cade Wren. "Some of them are asking for railgun deployments," Mora said. "Not just for defense, for presence. They want people to know Earth's watching." Wren nodded. "And we will watch, but not as tyrants." He tapped a screen, dozens of red dots blinking across the galaxy. All those centuries they mocked us, feared our temper, our brutality. Vance leaned forward. They were half right. Wren smiled, cold and tired. "We didn't want to lead, but they gave us no choice." On the outer rim, a drifting Vorten vessel intercepted a signal it wasn't meant to hear. A human engineer, testing a new, orbital railgun configuration. They weren't even in combat. They were calibrating, and still. The test shot split a moon fragment in two. The Vorton watched from far off, deep within their hive cluster, and for the first time in their long, predatory history, they did not send reinforcements. It wasn't the first time Earth had gone quiet, but this time, the silence had a shape, a memory, a sound that echoed across stars. The sound of steel accelerated beyond thought. The sound of thunder in the void. The sound of a line no enemy dared cross again. And in the space that followed that terrible sound, the galaxy listened. Atop the moon's dark side, Earth fleet engineers completed the last of the Ragnar rail. Installations for new magneto-accelerated turrets arranged like the points of a cross, each capable of leveling a continent from orbit, not to fire again, not to conquer, but to be seen, because sometimes the mere presence of thunder is louder than war. Ambassador Cade Wren stood on a diplomatic platform above Kepler Prima planet, once hostile to humanity's inclusion in the Concord. Now, their people stood in line to sign the Earth Accords. We always feared humans would burn the galaxy. One Kepler elder said, quivering, and you might have. Wren raised an eyebrow. Might have. The elder nodded. But instead, you lit a beacon. Meanwhile, Commander Mora stood alone in the Arctic blast chamber above the core-line weapon. Her breath fogged in the cold as she stared down the impossible length of the planetary railgun. She remembered watching that first slug scream into the sky, remembered what came after. But peace never sat still. Her wrist pad buzzed. A relay probe had gone dark deep, beyond the Veil Rift, where Earth's maps ended. She tapped for live data. Nothing, except a final still frame. IMAGEA, Shadow, not Vorton, not Concord, something older, larger, watching, in orbit. The UN's Retribution's crew was midshift when warning sirens screamed. Unidentified energy surge sector 12. No warp signature. No drive trace. It just, appeared. Commander Vance rushed to the display. The object was the size of a city, organic in shape, metallic in texture. No engines, no weapons. But it was moving slowly, directly toward Earth. The Council scrambled. Some panicked, others urged retreat. But Earth I didn't. Not this time. Vance opened comms. Wren's voice came through instantly. Council's begging for options. They want to run. Tell them, Vance said quietly. This time, Earth doesn't hide. He turned to Mora, who'd just arrived from Surface Command. She handed him a launch key. He didn't need to ask what for. The Antarctic core line was online. Target? Mora asked. Vance stared at the screen. The unknown entity. Still approaching. He shook his head. No target. What? He turned to her. We won't shoot unless it does. Let the galaxy see. We're not just a hammer. We're the judgment. And then just as the object reached Earth's outer exosphere, it stopped. No words, no lights, no sign of aggression. And after 3 full rotations of silence, it turned and vanished. Later, as the galaxy debated what it had been, probe, God, precursor Earth's stance, became legend. The humans who could shatter moons chose not to. They had made the sky scream once, and once was enough. Mora watched the newsfeed stream across her datapad world, after world voting to dissolve the old Concord and form a new one. With Earth at the table's head, she turned to Wren, standing nearby. They listened. Finally. He nodded, distant. But not because we spoke, he said. No, she agreed. Because the railgun did. Centuries from now, when children across the stars asked their elders how Earth rose to lead the galaxy, the story was always the same. They would say Earth had no voice, that it had no magic, no advanced gravity fields or light weapons, just a gun, one impossibly loud, impossibly final gun, fired once, and never again, because after that, the stars remembered, and none dared forget.